In the late 17th century, the Battle of Vienna, or the Siege of Vienna, by the Turkish army, almost succeeded. If the city had been defeated and became part of the Islamic world, the face of Europe might have been different today. But Vienna survived the long siege because of the help of European allies, especially the famous cavalry unit Hussars who flanked the Turkish army until it was defeated. This event became the inspiration for the immortal novel The Lord of the Rings. The Ottoman invasion. The Ottoman Empire, founded by the Turks, was recognized as a European superpower during the time of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, reigned 1520 to 1566, with the Habsburg dynasty of Austria as the main conflicting party. The Turks were able to conquer most of southeastern Europe, including the states that were once under the control of the Habsburg dynasty. The major invasions took place during the reign of Sultan Suleiman. After the Ottoman Empire had conquered most of Hungary under Sultan Suleiman, bordering the Habsburg Kingdom of Austria, whose leader was also the Holy Roman Emperor, Suleiman continued his offensive against Europe, first invading Vienna in 1529, but failed to conquer it. When winter came, the Ottomans abandoned the attack and retreated. However, the conquest of Vienna never left the minds of the Ottoman leaders, as the center of power of the Habsburg dynasty was a jewel in Europe, the capital of the Austrian kingdom, the court of the Holy Roman Empire, and a strategic gateway to the central part of the continent. Suleiman's failure to succeed in what he had failed to do attracted the Turks to resume their offensive in the early 1680s under Sultan Mehmed IV. This campaign was partly initiated by Imre Thököly, the Christian Hungarian leader. But he was a Calvinist. He contacted the Grand Vizier, equivalent to the position of the Grand Vizier, of the Ottoman Empire, Kara Mustafa Pasha, to attack Vienna. Because the Habsburg dynasty had not yet recovered from the 30 Years' War, it was an opportune time to conquer the city. When the Habsburg dynasty heard the news, Emperor Leopold I, reigned 1658 to 1705, of the Habsburg dynasty decided to flee Vienna, moving the court before the arrival of the Ottoman army to gather all Christian states in the name of the Holy League to help resist the invasion. The Second Siege of Vienna began on July 14, 1683. The Ottoman army, led by Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, had a total of 150,000 men, of whom about a tenth of the army were Janissaries, the most disciplined and strongest infantry units in the world. Vienna had to deal with a massive army that included one of the most feared units in the world in the 17th century. The Ottoman army had also learned from the failure of the first siege. Kara Mustafa Pasha knew that Sultan Suleiman's withdrawal in winter was due to the Turks' lack of food supplies, so he ordered the construction of a supply road to Vienna, allowing his army to besiege the city for as long as it needed. Despite having only 15,000 men left to defend the city, Vienna, under the leadership of Johann Andreas von Liebenberg and Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg, the mayor and chief of the city guard, defied the Turks with a strong defense system. Vienna at that time was a fortified city, with tall, star-shaped forts surrounding the city and several cannons. The city guards were confident that the walls and forts would hold off the enemy for a while, waiting for reinforcements from their leader, Emperor Leopold I. But from day to week to month, Vienna still had no sign of outside help. The Ottomans dug trenches around the city to protect it from the forts. Inside the city, the supply of supplies was running low, while the Ottomans were receiving more and more supplies. However, Kara Mustafa Pasha knew that the Christian army would soon be here, so he wanted to finish it off as soon as possible. He ordered the Turkish soldiers to dig a tunnel under the wall to plant explosives and detonate the wall to allow the infantry to enter the city. Battle of Vienna help from the Allies. Meanwhile, Emperor Leopold I sent a letter of assistance to Pope Innocent XI of the Roman Catholic Church in Rome, requesting that the Pope act as a mediator to call on Christian states throughout Europe to help fight in the war to liberate Vienna. The Pope immediately accepted the request, tried to persuade King Louis XIV of France but was ignored, and also asked the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and allies in the Holy Roman Empire, including the German and Italian states, to join the Holy League. After the announcement from the Vatican was sent out, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was initially reluctant to help until the Pope was able to persuade Charles of Lorraine to join the Electoral Army of Saxony and Bavaria. Along with the response of 30 German princes, Poland agreed to join the battle. As a result, the Christians were able to mobilize a large enough number of the Holy Sepulchre, about 80,000 men in total, to rush to Vienna's aid. The situation between the two sides was a contest. The time was truly different because the Turks themselves tried to destroy the walls of Vienna before the Christian army could attack them. However, due to the distance between the Christian states and kingdoms, it took months for the unification to happen. As Vienna was approaching the crisis point, on September 11, 1683, the Ottoman army successfully blew the city walls. The city guards tried their best to buy time. At the same time, the vanguard of the Holy League army under Emperor Leopold I, consisting of Austrian troops from the German and Italian states, arrived. But this army had about 47,000 soldiers, which was certainly less than the Turks who were besieging Vienna. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth army had to arrive later because of the distance and the obstacles of the terrain, which was the forest between Austria and Poland. They also had the Bertuzar cavalry unit, a heavily armored, winged army that was not well suited for traveling in dense forests. Arriving on the battlefield first, Emperor Leopold I had little choice. When the sight before him was the Turkish army pouring into the last line of defense of Vienna, he decided to rush into the Ottoman rear before it was too late. The Turks divided some of their forces to resist the vanguard of the Holy League, while at the same time dividing another force to continue to penetrate the city. The battle between the Vienna Liberation Army and the Ottomans took place on a hill called Karlenberg, a few kilometers from Vienna. Kara Mustafa Pasha sent his general infantry to the line of fire against the Holy League army, while the Janissaries continued to aggressively advance into the city. It turned out that the Holy League army had a strategic advantage from the line of fire on the hill, so they attacked the Ottoman front line until it began to retreat. The Turks were defeated. Early on the morning of September 12, 1683, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Army, led by King John III Sobieski, finally arrived. He did not hesitate. The Hussars rushed down the hill and immediately charged the Ottoman army to meet the army of Emperor Leopold I. The fierce attacks from the heavy cavalry forced the Turks to retreat to the main camp at the trench line. The Ottomans then threw all their forces into a full-scale confrontation with the Holy League and the Polish-Lithuanian heavy cavalry. King John III Sobieski commanded his 18,000 cavalry, including 3,000 Hussars, as the vanguard to break through the Ottoman army once more. The result was a great success for the Christian alliance. The Turks, who were mostly infantry, could not withstand the massive cavalry and were defeated in a terrible defeat. Kara Mustafa Pasha's red tents were torn to shreds. He escaped while thousands of his men were killed or taken prisoner. It is recorded that the Holy League army spent weeks collecting the supplies left behind by the Turks. This was the end of the Ottoman Empire's centuries-long threat to Europe. The battle was one of the greatest cavalry battles in human history, and inspired fantasy novelist J.R.R. Tolkien to recount one of the most tragic and memorable battles in The Lord of the Rings, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, in which the Rohirrim cavalry of Rohan charged the Orc army of Mordor that was besieging Minas Tirith. The Holy League's army was a resounding success in destroying the Turks, and the victory brought great fame to the Hussars. King John III Sobieski was known to the Turks as the Lion of Lechistan. Lechistan is the name of the culture, land, language, and origin of Poland, and subsequent Polish kings were given the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope. For Kara Mustafa Pasha, he was ordered to be executed by Sultan Mehmed IV during the retreat. The defeat at the Battle of Vienna shook the Ottoman Empire like never before. In addition to stopping the expansion of the empire because it stopped invading Europe, the Turks also began to lose the territories that they had conquered back to their original rulers or states. A major change occurred in 1686. The Austrian rulers succeeded in driving out the Turks who had occupied Buda, the capital of Hungary, for more than 150 years. And 11 years later, Prince Eugene of Savoy destroyed the Ottoman army at Zenta in northern Serbia. The Turks were finally forced to withdraw from Hungary and the Balkans. Thus, the influence that had once intimidated the Christian nations of Europe by the Turks was eroded until they were pushed back to their original territories and entered a period of decline in the early 19th century, until the Ottoman Empire was called the sick man of Europe.